Hi everyone, welcome to QT Talks. This is episode 1. This is the first QT Talks we posted. My name's Matt Wallace. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome everyone here today. I'm Vice President of People and Talent at Qualitest. I'm going to be joined today by Chris Hinchcliffe. He's a Senior Managing Quality Engineer, and Satvir Parmar, who's an Associate Vice President of Delivery. Today is, and the concept of QT Talks, it's a free series of webinars that Qualitest will be hosting every month to share some insights into the organization, enable people to find out a little bit about who we are, what we do, and more importantly, meet some of the great people that work at the organization. It's my absolute privilege and pleasure to host this first QT talk. So thank you for joining. We're going to have some questions at the end, so please put them into the chat. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me, talk through the agenda, tell you a little bit about Qualitest before we go through. So this is me. It's my absolute privilege and pleasure to work at Qualitest. I'm an HR director. I'm quite a tech-savvy HR director. I can't code, I can't test, but I've worked in HR and P&T for best part of 20 years. So it's an absolute joy to work at Qualitest. When I'm not at work, I'm a busy family man. I'm also a passionate climber, mountaineer, and I play really bad golf. And I think I'm also someone who is a big believer in giving back. So I've done some crazy things for charity, sort of dressing up in fancy dress and abseiling down large towers, and also spending time helping young offenders get back into the workplace. So that's a little bit about me. As I said, it's my pleasure to host today's session. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Qualitest. And then hand over to Chris to share his story. So Qualitest, who are we? Well, Qualitest is the world's largest testing and QA organization. We're around 20 years old, and we're recognized by Gartner being as part of their magic quadrant for the last 5 years. We're private equity backed. We've got big growth plans. And we work with global customers on a range, to offer really a range of bespoke QA and testing solutions. And we operate in a very wide range of commercial sectors, everything from telco, finance, banking, utilities, public sector, and media. So as an organization, Qualitest, testing is very much at the heart of who we are and what we do. We're very passionate about quality, and it is actually in our DNA, and it's very much one of our values. We're a global team. There are nearly 3,000 quality testers around the globe, and they're based in these locations here, everywhere from the US right through to India, and we've got strong presence in each of those areas. We, as a team, people work as trusted partners with our customers to really deliver good solutions and testing for them. We hire grads and also more experienced testing professionals. We can offer people careers, testing and quality assurance careers, with clear insight into the organizations. And we offer movement and projects for our employees. Lastly, we're a diverse organization, and we love inclusion and diversity, and we really champion women in tech, autism in tech, and veterans. So for us, people are very much at the heart of everything we do. So our people work with our customers in a range of ways to really deliver what our customers need most. We offer a variety of testing solutions. We're very flexible. and we really understand our customers. So our people work as true partners with our customers. We vary our engagement models really to offer the perfect QA and testing solution, and we're very scalable and flexible in terms of what we do, and we really get to the heart of our customers' needs, their business goals and their priorities, to offer a broad range of testing solutions there, which you can see. Now, I'm going to hand over to Chris in a second, and he'll share his story at Qualitest, as well as his experiences sharing some of these experiences with customers. So, Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Welcome all. As Matt said, my name's Chris Hinchcliffe. I'm a Senior Managing Quality Engineer at Qualitest. That's a wonderful job title, which says very little about what my day-to-day work life actually means. What I do is I help customers solve QA problems at an organization program level. So whether that's program test management, whether that's organizational change, whether that's transformation. I've been testing for about 20 years, in fact, just a bit over 20 years, the last 4 of which have been within Qualitest. I normally work either in telco or in financial services, so quite heavily regulated, complex environments. When I'm not busy helping others, I try and keep in shape. I'm a huge cyclist. I'm a huge fan of cycling, but I turn my hand to pretty much anything and like to do a big physical challenge once a year. As my very, very cheesy Twitter profile says, stop it, Matt. Ask me about test cycles and bicycles.
I've got to say, Chris, that is a great photo. It's a very serious photo there.
That is, yeah. That's a very good memory for me as well. I tend to be quite competitive. That was one of a series of cyclocross race I was doing a couple of years ago, and yeah, I remember my only thought during that race was keep breathing and get to the end, which is probably a philosophy for life and work as well. Okay, so today I'm going to take you through how we improved program test management with one of our clients. So we have a big global telco company. They're running a major strategic change program. They're migrating from a legacy platform over to a new platform that's a combination of bespoke development and off-the-shelf apps. There's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of complexity. There's multiple different integration companies working with the client. So there's the client team themselves. They have a systems integrator working on design and development. They've got a different systems integrator working on end-to-end test activities. They've got a management consultancy running the program management office. But after all of that, they've come to us and said, we're having some problems with testing. We're not sure what the problems really are, but we don't really understand what's going on. Can you come in and help? So last August, I was asked to join the team, come in, have a look, and figure out really what they could do better. Can you go forward for me, please? Okay. So the way I normally approach this kind of thing is it's kind of like looking at a medical problem or an injury. So when I was training for a marathon, I got a bad knee injury. It was really painful and really stopped me from training. So the first thing I did was I took painkillers. That addressed the symptoms. The pain went away. I could actually get mobile again. I could get up and running. It didn't solve any of the underlying problems, but it got me moving. So get rid of the symptoms. Then I went to a physio, got a set of exercises to do, had some physio work done, managed to reduce some inflammation in some of the ligaments in my knee, which kind of fixed the root cause. So not only was I not feeling the pain and the injury wasn't there anymore, but it didn't really address the chronic problems. And with the help of the physio and some gait analysis, the chronic problem was that the shoes I was wearing were not supporting the gait of my running gait, the way my feet worked. And that was causing problems further up. So we addressed the symptoms, we solved the root cause that caused those symptoms, and then we tackle the chronic problems. It's the same in consultancy. There's some pain that someone is feeling, in this case, a client. We fix the pain, we fix the root cause, and then we figure out what it was that caused that root cause in the first place. So that's what we did on this engagement. Okay, so first week, I go in and it's kind of like starting any other new job. It's kind of a strange experience. You generally don't expect to get access to email in the first week. So you are kind of there, you're talking to the people around you, you're gathering as much information as you can. In this case, I knew that there were 2 opportunities a week for testing to actually interact with the rest of the program and make a difference. We had a technical leads meeting on a Tuesday, which was about 2 hours, and we had a program board meeting on a Thursday, which was about 2.5 hours. So day 2 of my engagement, myself and 18 other people walked into a meeting room that was about big enough for 12. So back in the day when we could actually all meet together, and everybody had a chance to say their piece. Everybody talked about what had been happening in their area. Testing managed to complain about development and infrastructure and environments and data. And at the end of the 2-hour meeting, I walked out and I had no idea what the quality of the application was. I didn't know what needed to be fixed. I didn't know what worked well. There was no plans to resolve any of the complaints that had been raised. There was no way forward. There were no common actions. So that plus conversations I had later with the various stakeholders, it was clear the program just didn't understand what testing was doing, how far it had progressed, and where the system was overall. Testing were moaning about the things that were affecting them rather than things that were affecting the system and the program. There were often arguments. There was not a lot of common alignment. And fundamentally, program management just didn't trust test delivery anymore. Can we go forward? So the first thing we do, look at the symptoms. In this case, the symptoms is we've got 2 opportunities to communicate, 2 opportunities to sell testing to the rest of the organization, the rest of the program. Some of this is pretty basic, but it's important to remember. When you're doing program test management, it's as much about managing the program as it is about testing. Each program's different. You need to learn how, what, and who make it tick, who the important people are. A lot of that information can come from what's in the program packs themselves. So simple things, complete the pre-reading, understand what's going to be discussed. The things that people are flagging are the things that people care about. So if you can understand what they are and what impact test can or should have on those things, you're going to be able to contribute more. From a test perspective, you can't go in with a laundry list of 50 things that don't work. You need to provide concise headlines, highlights, and escalations. What do you need help with? What's working well? Where are you against plan? And then if there is anything that's going to be controversial, talk to the people before the meeting. Brief your key participants. You're not there to scare people. You're there to make progress, for everyone to come together and actually get the program over the line. There's no point petty point scoring going on. It doesn't provide any value. And especially when you've got multiple systems integrators, each of which have got their own contract and statements of work that they care about, you need to bring everyone together, or else they will just go off in their own directions. Okay, so it took a couple of weeks, but we managed to actually have a solid presence within these meetings. We actually managed to articulate what was happening within testing. But that still didn't solve any of those root cause problems. So next step is to look at exactly how we fix some of these issues. The first thing in terms of developing the confidence of the program in testing is make sure everyone agrees what testing is, what it does, and what it's trying to get to. So we revisited and updated the test strategy. We created a management summary of the strategy. The strategy was about 60 or 70 pages long. About 50 of those were about processes and activities that needed to happen within testing itself, and really didn't need to be read by anyone outside of testing. So summarize the important things that management care about. Make sure you're articulating who's doing what, where, and what value it provides. And from there, we got buy-in from our sponsors. The next thing we did was we looked at reporting. By this point, we started to prove ourselves. I was able to bring in another of my colleagues, a test lead, and we set about changing the way reporting worked. So by the time it got to the end of the program board meeting on a Thursday, traditionally, you already started preparing your pack for the next week. It would take about 4.5 man-days over about a day and a half elapsed in order to produce a reporting pack, and that was the static pack that got produced. So the information you were providing was really already a week old. We threw that away. We went from 12 to 15 slides to 3 to 4. We were learning and trying to understand what was going on. And from there, we were able to provide a set of slides that specifically targeted what each member of the stakeholder group was looking for. I know that, in fact, I can't see at the moment, but I'm fairly certain that Dina, who is my test lead, who has been assisting, is actually watching. One of the things that she had to do was she had to improve her skill set. And so she sat down and did some data modeling and data reporting training in order to produce a better set of reports. Fortunately, with Qualitest, we've got access to a lot of online resources and training, so she was able to do that. I'm fairly certain there was nothing else she'd rather be doing when she's staying in a hotel in the middle of London on expenses than doing training online. But it did mean we produced a really good set of reporting packs, which were brief, which used timely information and got us to where we needed to be. After that, we looked at the metrics. So Test was talking about test cases. We care about test cases. We have X number of test cases we need to run. We will run them by Y date. Doesn't actually tell you anything about the system. So we changed the metrics we were gathering. We changed what we were reporting on. That allowed us to report on business journeys, on user stories, on things that people in the rest of the program cared about. So we were providing a spotlight on the quality of the system rather than the progress of testing. And then from there, when it becomes less about us talking about ourselves, we were able to develop positive relationships. So with infrastructure, with technical design, with the development teams, with the data migration teams, we removed the blame culture. We focused on issues and we focused on common goals. Can we go forward from there? Okay, so we've managed to clear out most of the initial problems, we don't understand what testing's doing. And I think the client liked us, which is always nice. So from there, we look at our chronic issues. So we've got some tactical fixes we can deal with. So we rationalized our test environment usage. We improved the sanity testing. So there were less of those problems of what code base is in which environment and is it good enough? Should we start testing? Can we send it back? We got rid of those by structuring how code got into testing, which environments got used when. And then we also completely overhauled the defect management process. So at one point, there were 4 or 5 different defect management processes. Not all of them were being managed properly. Not all of them were being reported on effectively. We worked with the management consultancy, created a single source of truth that had input from the business owners, from the product owners, so that everybody had a common view of what the defects were. We were also asked to step outside of that initial remit. So we did some additional test management and test governance on some shared testing activities that were outside of the end-to-end remit we were looking at. We also created a new strategy for testing from our provisioning system down onto the mobile networks that we were talking to. And that, I think, provided a great deal of value as well. Can we go forward from there, please? Okay. So the big takeaways. Understand the priorities. What's important to the program? Testing should always be about helping the program tick off its priorities. I hate to say this, but testing doesn't actually really provide anything to an end user in a production environment. All we do is provide information so people can make decisions about how good something is before it goes into production. It's important to understand what those priorities are, build good communications with everybody who you need to talk to at every level, not just your escalations, not just your stakeholders, your peers, and the people you interact with. Focus on quick wins first, followed by strategic change. You need to build both your reputation and the reputation of testing in this environment. So quickly build, okay, we've succeeded here, we do this next. We've succeeded here, we do this next, rather than we're going to do this thing over here. It's going to take us a few months and we'll talk to you once we've got there. No one will continue to trust you and have faith in you at that point. You need to prove that you can do the job so that they will let you do the job. Stay focused. It's really important to stay focused. There's so many moving parts on a big program. You need to work out what is the things that you need to care about and remain committed to hitting those. And obviously the big thing there is you're there to provide value. Consultancy isn't the least expensive thing in the world. We're not cheap. We do things that add value. Our main aim is to add as much value as we can. To become a trusted advisor, to become the person that your stakeholders, your peers look to and talk to when they say, I've got a QA problem, I've got a testing problem. Not go and do this for me, but what would you do? How would you approach this so that I can be better? The last thing I want to talk about is I was on Twitter discussion a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about best practice. I'm not going to get into best practice now. I've got some very strong thoughts about the difference between best practice and good practice, but we're looking at what best practice means and if there were any real best practices around program test management. And the thing I resolved was the only real best practice in program test management is having the right mindset going in. And from my point of view, that mindset is three things. It's be ethical, be open, honest, transparent about what you're doing and why. Use empathy. You're generally going into a new environment. People are already there. They already have a history and a story there. They're not necessarily setting out to do things wrong or to do things badly or to stop you from doing what you need to do. Consider them, use empathy, and above all, learn. Learn new skills, new techniques, learn about the domain, the environment, the solution you're looking at, and the people. Ethical, empathy, learn. From my point of view, it's the only way you can deliver program test management. Okay, so moving forward from there, Satvir will now take you through how the work that myself and my team were involved in fits into the larger world.
Thank you, Chris. You will be a hard act to follow. So who am I? Firstly, I am a mother. So my day starts with waking up, getting my little one ready and getting him into nursery. And my day ends with putting him to bed. And then I get a big glass of wine. I am a daughter. I have to ring my parents every day, mainly so they can speak to my little one. And then I'm a successful career woman. So I have worked in IT now for over 25 years. I did start in Safeways. So those of you old enough might remember Safeways. It's now Morrison's. And I started as a graduate in the help desk, in the call room, which I never took seriously. And then I became a coder. So I was a developer, not a good one. And slowly I moved into testing. Within Qualitest, I have a lovely title. It's so long. It's Associate Vice President of Delivery. But basically what I do is I look at strategically, I look after clients and I see how strategically we can help them move forward with their testing. So I look at the bigger picture and I work with Chris very closely to see how we move that. So some of my interests are, I used to be an avid kickboxer because I used to love Van Damme films and I used to think that I'm going to be the next kickboxer. It didn't work because it meant a lot of hours of training, which I just wasn't ready to do. However, I have checked when I can put my little one in. So when he turns 4, he will be enrolled and I might join with him. Unlike Chris, I absolutely hate cycling. But a few years back, I did do the London to Brighton charity run because one of my testers died from a brain tumour. And we were very close. For 2 years, I used to sit next to him. So we all decided that we would give something back to Macmillan because they're the ones that helped him so much. They would take him for days out with him and his daughter. So we did this. Unfortunately, I thought I was fit enough to do it without any training. So for a week, I did not sit. So that's a little about me. So now let me talk to you about what I actually do. And what I'm going to cover is how you actually build the client view and what we actually need to do. What is my day-to-day running? How I look at them strategically. So if we move to the next slide. It's good that I'm leading on from Chris, because Chris has told you the day-to-day, how, the nitty-gritty, how he does it. Now I will take it a step back and show you how I look at it from more of a holistic view and work with my stakeholders to try and ensure we're giving them the value they need. And the best way that I've always done this in my career is by looking at the target operating model. So the initial target operating model tends to look at the strategic view of where the company wants to be. It will look at their stakeholders, their processes, the tools, everything, how it sits together. So it's kind of a blueprint of their whole footprint. So when I think of blueprint, what comes to my mind is more, I don't know if most of you have watched the Italian Job. So when they put their plans together and they make sure they know everything before they do that robbery, that's exactly how I see our operating model has to be. It has all the information that is needed for that company to move forward. And then tagged onto that, what I've always done, and I believe it works, is creating a QA target operating model. And this will show you exactly where QA wants to be and how it will get there. So we break it down into three main areas. The business model. So this is the services that we're actually going to provide. So for example, you can give governance. You can give more of a light touch governance. You can be more medium, where you give some testing, but mainly you'll give guidance, or you can be heavily involved in the actual testing that's being done. And then encompassing that is your operating model. So what are those governance processes that you're going to be putting into place? What is the standards that everyone needs to follow? And then who are your stakeholders? So within QA, I would look at stakeholders ranging from your development team, but then down to your help desk, because they're the ones that then are going to have to take those calls. They need to be trained. Usually a lot of the times QA will do that training, or at least be included to help create those books, to help them. And then it's your skills, the people. It's important to make sure you have the right set of skills to make sure you can move forward. Now, that's not everyone has to have the latest tech, not everyone has to have automation. You still need manual testers. You still need to be able to have that look and feel to make sure you can move things forward. It's making sure you've got that right balance. And that's everything that you need to highlight and create in your operating model. And when you're creating the operating model, you need to understand what are the priorities for QA and the business. Now, quality is always first. Everyone will say quality, but then you need to understand is, are you moving? So I look at one of the clients I work with, currently they're looking to move towards agile, which a lot of companies are. And what they want is bi-weekly releases, and they want faster time to market. So for them, their priorities be slightly different. So they want speed, and they want adoption to be something that we look at more so than maybe visibility, which will be around your dashboards and your metrics. So it's building that picture and actually understanding what that picture is. And I remember when I was more into delivery, and I used to think, this is just basic stuff. Everyone should know it. And it is stuff that you know, but it's very hard to keep on track and make sure you always come back to what it is that your client wants. And that's why having an operating model always helps. It's like your little Bible that your little handbook Bible that you can go through. Now, if I go to the next slide, I'll actually go into the principles of creating your target operating model. So firstly, you need it to be easy to work with. It has to be something that you can articulate to others, to your stakeholders, and they can understand it, and they will appreciate what's actually being said. And this should be done by one person that owns QA. So you need someone who's accountable. That person should either help write this operating model or they have to be involved and own it and be able to then talk to others to make sure everyone understands why it has been created and what it's trying to do. You'll have those standardized processes that you expect everyone to be following. So we would expect if it's a project, they would follow these processes and procedures. They would use the tools that have been defined as well as the BAU world, because that will also allow us to demonstrate our value add, because then we can create dashboards. We can have dashboards that are meaningful and reports. So then we will be comparing projects against other projects and we'll have the same outcome. Whereas if you don't have those set standards, you can have apples and oranges and you're comparing it to bananas. So you'll never really have a clear view of what's happening. And nowadays, a lot of organizations, they use consultancies. However, they also use their internal QA teams as a consultancy. So they try to keep their OPEX low, so their operating costs low. So they will try to put their internal staff into projects where they usually work through CapEx. So what they will do is what you need to do is ensure that service, that excellent service is there, so that you are giving your stakeholders what they actually want, which then goes back to understanding who your stakeholders are. So it all fits in together and it gives you a very clear picture and it keeps you focused on what you're meant to be doing. This can change, and as this change or things evolve, you need to change as you go along. So if we take COVID-19, for example, that has changed the way many companies are working, many people are working, how we're all working, which is why you then have to ensure that you have a flexible framework that you can adapt to different ways of working. You can adapt when things have changed. And a lot of companies are going through this whole transformation at the moment, which is where an operating model can really help you keep things and keep that understanding on how you're moving forward. Now I'll talk, if we go to the next slide, I'll talk about the coverage. And all of these sit together. So they all explain how it comes together. So when you're creating your operating model, the vision is the main thing that you always need to remember. So you need to always link back to that organization vision. And you need to look at your business process. You need to look at your business model of what it is, what your customers are saying. So for me, at times when I've sat down with the client and I've thought, well, no, actually, you should do it like this, or I think this is a better way. But then when they've spoken and told me what their goals are and also what their challenges are or what they're working with, then you actually really understand and put that plan together to make sure it works for them. And as I mentioned before, you tailor your services. So you want to make sure you give the services that are needed for them, not what you think they want, but what they actually would need and how they can move forward. And then with that, you put your operating model together, which will give you those processes that have to be adaptable to create your governance framework. And within there, you'll have your standard processes, you'll have your dashboards, you'll have everything that allows them to be successful. The flip side of that is you actually do need the tools to make sure you can move that forward. So depending on the type of methodologies they're using, they might need test management tools. They might go for something like JIRA or ALM, and actually understanding how that's going to be used, putting that process together to make sure you're using it in the way that it should be used. So a lot of companies nowadays, they'll take tools like JIRA, and I've had this in some other companies where I've worked, but they've not really understood the potential of the tool. So they've paid for it, they've taken it, they've given it to different projects, they've used it how they've wanted, they've created different workflows. So each project is using a different workflow and it's not aligned in any way. So then the next project comes and they'll have to just recreate it how they want. But with this operating model, it should be actually defined that this is where you can find how you set it up. This is the team you go to, who you talk to make sure you have it how it needs to be. And on top of that, as you know, you need the environments. Now, no one's saying you need 15 environments, one environment for every testing, but it's how you use it and making sure that that environment is robust enough to be able to work how you need to work, to be able to help your methodologies as you're going forward. And that's pretty much the areas that I wanted to cover. And it sounds as if it's very much all common sense, but when you're actually in the nitty-gritty and sitting there with your business and you're talking through it, it's a lot harder and a lot more complicated. So creating this operating model could take months, because you have to sit with the different teams and you have to really understand what the organization wants and where they're going. And again, resourcing, just like Chris was saying, it's the actual people that are working there. You need to be able to trust them, work with them, and they need to trust you. So it's a really intricate piece of work that needs to be done, and it takes time, but if it's done correctly, it can be a very powerful tool to help you move forward with your goals. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. So if we go to the next slide, my takeaways would be, one is that it's something that's come out from Chris's and my conversation, that you really need to understand what your customers' needs are. It's not just because, I know a lot of people think you're a consultancy, you're just there to sell. It's not, it's actually seeing what they need and giving them what they want. And that's why I have to say I love my job. I love coming in and I love going and working with the clients, because the clients can see I'm not trying to sell you something. I want you to succeed, because if you succeed, I succeed, which is where we are a team. It's no them and us. It's what's your goals. Let me help you work with you. Let me work with you to actually achieve them. It's also about making sure your team is empowered. So, I mean, you can ask Chris, I ping him quite often, quite a few times a day. So what do you think about this? What's going on? He'll ping me back and we can have a discussion, and vice versa. I think I ping him more than he pings me, but hey, it still works both ways. It's just making sure you work as a team. And my biggest point I would say is, don't be afraid to try. So I remember when I first joined QT and I was walking down with my boss and we were going to meet the client. We were going to go out for dinner with the client. And as we walked up, he was saying about, don't be scared to try. You should never be afraid to try and fail, because as long as you can pick yourself and continue. He goes, you don't want to look back at your career and think you never tried, or you were always too scared to try. And I looked at him at the time and I thought, well, that's all good for you to say that to me, because you've got a successful career and you're senior and you've proved yourself. But it has resonated with me, and it is something I can say today. I've been with QT 10 months and I've taken a lot of risks and I have tried, and some of them I have completely nosedived and it's been a belly flop. But I've picked myself up, I've learned from it, and I've tried other things, and it works. And the one good thing I have to say, my boss was true. He was true to his word. He's always stood by me through those. So for me, it's just don't be afraid to try, because out of 10, maybe one will hit, and it will hit that point. And then celebrate your wins. So I know in this day and age we can't meet, but virtual drinks. Like I've been to quite a few virtual drinks. There's been some people who've left where we've had wines, coffee. We've had wines, champagne. There's been others where we've just had coffee. But it's still celebrate. Just because we can't meet physically, that doesn't mean that we stop. It means we just find new ways. And with that, I will hand over to Matt so he can get the questions that are being asked.
Thank you, Satvir, and thank you, Chris. I have to say, I've been with Qualitest for 6 months, but it's so insightful to hear from both of you. And from my perspective, huge amount of learning there. So thank you both of you for sharing your story and experiences. We're gonna now have some Q&A. We've had some questions already, which I'll share. If people have questions, please pop them in the comments and we'll come to them. So Chris, first question for you. If you could go through that experience and that project again, what would you do differently?
More than a few things, I think. I definitely made some mistakes, and I think the program definitely made some mistakes as well. I think a couple of the big ones would be, I did mention that we completely redesigned the defect management system. We made a bit of a glaring error in that we ended up with priority and business priority, which did not help when it came to explaining what priority something was. So I would probably have gone back and spent a little bit more time reviewing our defect management model. That would definitely have changed. I would think I would also have paid a little bit more attention to some of the things that were happening quietly at the sidelines, where there wasn't as much noise around a specific topic. There was a specific test phase, in fact, that was quite quiet for the first month when I was there. And it turned out that that was because that test phase was completely blocked, but nobody was really talking about it because everyone had just accepted that it had been really blocked for actually several months. Going down the line, as we got to the back end of last year, start of this year, it became one of the most important things we had to deliver. I think if I'd understood and paid attention to that earlier, we would have got a lot more value out of that test phase a lot earlier and would have had a lot less pain. I think that's probably the two things that spring to mind immediately.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Really, really good insight, and thank you. So Satvir, one for you, and question from Michael. So Michael, thank you for joining. Why would you need a separate QA target operating model if there was a clear business and organizational operating model?
It's a good point. So the business operating model is more high level. So this will cover how the business and the business strategy and strategic moves are, which will be very different from your QA operating model, because that will be more defined around how you're going to do your QA and what's your QA objectives, which will vary from your overall business objectives. They will cascade in. However, for example, as I mentioned, you would use more, if you were moving towards an agile way of working, you would look at more adoption of agile. How would you adopt that? What tools are you going to use specific to QA? So I think it's a good point, and there should be a link within the business operating model to show you that you should go to your QA operating model, but each department, like the development department, the QA department, they should have their own operating model and how they're working, because it will be more detailed.
No, that makes sense, because I mean the concept of a target operating model I'm very familiar with but you're right, it has different connotations for different people. And I think you're right, different models have different elements. So yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Michael. Chris, one for you. If any defect is not agreed with stakeholders, and there's kind of, let's say, a difference of opinion between stakeholders in terms of how you fix that, how would you ensure that we, Qualitest and I guess the project team you're working in, make sure we put in the right strategies to solve that problem?
The difference between a CR and a defect is always a matter of opinion, especially on the edges, on the borders. What I'd say is, the first thing is, if your test cases are tracking back to your requirements or your user stories, and they have been reviewed up front by the product owner or the requirement owner, depending on who actually defines them, then from that point, you should be able to differentiate between, is it a defect, is it a CR? From there, the next step after that is making sure that the different stakeholders actually have agreement on what the functionality should be. From that point, I would tend to take a little bit of a sidestep and say, okay, the end solution differs from what the customer actually wants. It's now up to the program management as to whether or not that is a CR that needs to be separately funded, or if that changes within the scope of what they're going to deliver. Test can give information about where they think it is based on the status of the documents and the requirements, but testing can't make the decision on behalf of the stakeholders. Our job is always to provide information so that others can make those kind of informed decisions. The better information we can give, the better the informed decision is. But there will always come a point where, is it a CR, is it a defect, is an argument for the people who pay the bills. And they're the only people who can answer it.
That's a really good point, Chris. Satvir, one for you from Mark. I know it's sort of going back to the concept of getting engagement on the target operating model. How do you gather that information from stakeholders and customers? Because taking people on the journey is always a challenge. So any thoughts, tips, advice would be really helpful.
So I can say from both points of view how I've done it when I've been actually been the client. So I've been the internal QA team, and then I'll talk a bit about how I've done it as doing it as a consultant. So internally, it was easier because I've got access to everyone that I needed to, and I was the point of contact for QA. So I was heading up QA. So I then booked meetings with all the different stakeholders that I thought were there. So like the development team, the head of help desk, the SDM team, so the business, for which area I was covering. So I had meetings with all the different stakeholders that I'd put down, and then I had workshops with them, or I had one-to-ones with them where we talked about what it was that they saw QA should be doing and how I thought QA should be working, and then we built that model together. And the reason why I built it with them was so they felt involved, and it wasn't just something that I was dictating to them. It's something that they believed in, and that we worked on it together. And once I'd created it, I actually had workshops with them and their teams to walk them through it, to make sure it was easy to work with. And they did understand it, and they did buy in. And if they didn't, then I went back and took the comments, and we did just an iteration until we were all satisfied with how it was working, because it's teamwork. Now, on the other side, as a consultant, how I've done it is usually I've worked with the single point of contact within the business, within my client, within that organization, and I've sat down with them and explained to them what I want to do, how I want to achieve it, and explain that we're a team when we're going to do this. And then as a team, we've gone out and met each of the stakeholders. Again, I rely on the head of QA to help me with the names and to book the meetings, but then as a team, we show a front and we'll build it together. And that doesn't mean that I'm thinking, what sales can I make? It's how can we better the way you work? Even if that doesn't involve us, how does it benefit you? And that's how I've built them.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Satvir. Really, really great answer there, and a great question. Chris, one for you from Georgina. In the example you shared, it was actually a different supplier doing the testing. So I guess that creates a level of challenge in terms of getting engagement and actually getting them to engage with you in the process. What are your thoughts on that, and any kind of any builds that you'd like to share in terms of the example you talked through previously?
Okay, so to be fair to the supplier, they knew they had a communication problem too, and they hadn't been able to fix it. Obviously, the client wouldn't have come to us if they could have fixed it bilaterally between themselves and their supplier. So there was acknowledgement that there was something that needed to be fixed. From my point of view, one of the first sets of conversations that I had were with the test leadership team from that supplier to understand what they were facing, what they were seeing, their opinions of how the meetings were going. And they were feeling a lot of pain. They were feeling that they weren't being listened to, that they weren't getting the support and assistance they needed to resolve the problems that they saw as blocking them. So what I did was I helped to take the pain away. And one of the things that consultancy can do is we can take problems away from people and fix them. And so that's what we did. I took the problem away. I said, okay, I will represent testing in these communication meetings, in the program board. I will make sure that we're responsible for what the messaging looks like. And as a group, we will sit down and figure out what the most important things are for us and what the escalations are and what the priority of those activities are. And then I will work on your behalf to get them there. So whilst I went in and provided leadership, a lot of that leadership was based on what they were asking for. Did that help?
It does. It does. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it's really all about the people and getting people engagement to agree a solution and find a solution to the problem jointly.
Yeah, and it's about understanding your value as well in that space, both to the client and to the third-party supplier. So the third-party supplier, my value to them was I could take away the pain. They could focus on testing, and we could get some of their problems resolved. That's where I added value to them.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And actually, talking about value, and it's a great point that Douglas made. So Douglas, thank you for joining us today. And I think Satvir and Chris, this is a question to both of you. Douglas's question is really how do you organizations thrive on people adding good value? Are there, I guess it'd be good to you to share maybe a couple of top tips to share with the audience in terms of how you add value and some thoughts and advice on that before. So Chris, would you like to lead on that?
I will. Okay. So I suppose the big things from my point of view are understanding the difference between what people want and what people need. It's a very simple thing to say. It's a very hard thing to do. Generally speaking, people, especially when they engage, people have a list of things they want you to deal with. But as you talk to them, you start to understand what they need as well. That might not be part of your initial engagement. It might not be part of the terms that you're delivering, and you may not actually be able to deliver it within the scope of your remit. But if you understand what people need, what the things are that will help, some of it's experience, some of it's knowledge, some of it is reading the room, getting the context of what's going on. If you can give them what they've asked for, so their want, but also give them some of what they need as well, that's adding value. Value is making sure they get what they need as well as what they want.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Satvir?
Yeah. So to add to that, so just as Chris said, so one of the clients I'm working with now, the value add we're trying to show is, as I said, they want to move more agile, but they've got no transparency of whether that's good or not. So the value add that we will add for them is giving them that transparency, building those real-time dashboards for them. It's not something they've specifically asked for, but we know it's a problem there, that they need to see what is actually happening, to see where they're going. And that's the kind of value we would add, to show them where they're going and also what tools they're using. So we would look to see the next gen tools and how it can bring a better ROI for them. It's looking at these parts that we would put together for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Satvir. That's really good. I think what we got is probably time for one more question, just looking at time, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to look for one last question. And I think, Satvir, actually, this is one for you. So in the example you shared, you talked about challenges. Do you see those challenges as more of, if you like, sorry, mistakes that you made? Do you see them as more of challenges than learning points, and things you take value from, and in terms of take forward to the future, learn from them in terms of your personal and professional development?
So everything, and you're right, personal and professional, everything I've done is a learning curve. And I would never, if I use the word mistake, that was wrong. It is more of a challenge. It's something that I've grown from. So I can't, from a personal point of view, everything that I've done has made me who I am. So I wouldn't change anything. From a professional point of view, everything I've done has helped me to where I am. So again, I mean, there are things that I would have done slightly differently, but I've learned from them, and I think I have evolved overall as a person. So yes, I do learn from them, and I am.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add one point also. I saw a comment that someone said, celebrate your failures. And that is such a good point, because it's something that I completely agree with. It's not just your wins, but it's your failures too. You need to celebrate them.
Yeah, I love the concept, and I've just seen the comment too, and it's celebrate the failures, but see them as discoveries and personal learning. And to be honest, I've had the same in my career, where you've had challenges, you've overcome them, you learn from them, and it's personal growth and discovery, and it's such a valuable sort of concept. Perfect. I think in terms of questions, thank you everyone for joining. Douglas, you in the comments, you raised a great question. Will this webinar be shared? Yes, is the answer. We'll share a recording on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube afterwards. So thank you everyone for joining today. So what I'd say, just as a wrap, just before we end, it's been an absolute pleasure for me to host today's session. I'd like to thank Satvir and Chris for sharing their stories and experiences. It's been a privilege and certainly a learning curve. And I think just if you'd like to learn and find out a little bit more about Qualitest, please get in touch with us. We've got the details there, and thank you for joining us all. And it's been, as I said, been an absolute privilege and pleasure. We hope to see you at the next QT Talks, and thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.